The emergency sirens hadn't stopped wailing for 3 days straight on Sanctuary Prime. The massive space station hung in the void like a dying star, its lights flickering as power diverted to shields that barely held anymore. Inside the council chamber, representatives from 47 species gathered in what everyone knew might be their final meeting. Day-One stood quietly in the back of the chamber, his dark eyes watching the chaos unfold. The human ambassador was a small figure compared to most beings present, but something about his stillness made others notice him. His gray hair was neatly combed, and his simple black suit stood in stark contrast to the elaborate robes and armor worn by other delegates. He had been listening to the screaming for 2 hours now. Admiral Thorex slammed his 4 massive arms against the podium. The reptilian commander's scales had lost their green sheen over the past months of endless warfare. His eyes, once proud and fierce, now held only desperation. 70% losses, he roared, his voice cracking. 70% of our combined fleets are gone. Destroyed, consumed by the Vral swarm. The chamber erupted in overlapping voices. Some delegates wept openly. Others shouted accusations at their neighbors. The Krell representative, a insectoid being named Hana, stood from her seat. Her chitinous armor was scarred from battle, and one of her compound eyes had been replaced with a crude mechanical substitute. My homeworld falls in 17 days, Hana said. Her translated voice eerily calm despite the words. Perhaps less. The swarm has entered our system. We have 3 defense platforms remaining. We estimate 4 billion casualties in the first week of ground invasion. She paused, mandibles clicking together. This is not a request for aid. This is a notification of extinction. The Krell will cease to exist within the month. Silence fell over the chamber like a heavy blanket. Day-One closed his eyes briefly. 4 billion lives. The number was too large to comprehend, yet too small compared to the total deaths across the galaxy. Estimates suggested nearly 2 trillion beings had already perished since the Vral swarm had arrived from dark space 3 years ago. The swarm wasn't like conventional enemies. They didn't conquer or occupy. They consumed. Entire planets stripped to bare rock within days. Every biological organism converted into more Vral drones. Every battle resulted in the swarm growing stronger while the coalition grew weaker. It was mathematics. Cold, simple, inevitable mathematics leading to extinction. The humans, someone shouted. Day-One opened his eyes. A Valtorian delegate was pointing at him with a clawed finger. The humans sit in their corner of space and do nothing. They send us reports. They share their data. They give us their precious technology. But where are their ships? Where are their soldiers? Thorex turned his great head toward Day-One. The Admiral's expression was hard to read, but Day-One had learned to recognize reptilian body language over the past 2 years. This was barely controlled rage. Ambassador Day-One, your people joined our coalition 2 years ago. You have seen our suffering. You have attended the memorials for 63 fallen civilizations. Yet humanity sends no military forces. Why? Day-One walked slowly to the center of the chamber. His footsteps echoed in the sudden quiet. Every eye, lens, and sensory organ focused on him. He had known this moment would come eventually. The coalition's patience had finally run out. We have been preparing, Day-One said simply. His voice was soft, but it carried clearly through the chamber's acoustics. Humanity does not have vast fleets like the Valtorians. We do not have warrior castes like the Krell. We are a young species, weak by your standards. Then you are useless to us, Thorex growled. Confession of weakness does not excuse cowardice. Day-One didn't flinch. I did not say we would not fight. I said we were preparing. There is a difference. He pulled a small communication device from his pocket. The holographic display activated, showing a simple message that had arrived from Earth 3 hours ago. Day-One had been waiting for it before attending this meeting. The message contained only 7 words. 1 ship. That's all we're sending. Day-One projected the message for the entire chamber to see. The reaction was immediate and explosive. Delegates surged to their feet, shouting. Someone threw a data pad that clattered against the floor near Day-One's feet. Thorex's roar silenced most of the noise. 1 ship? The Admiral's voice was dangerously quiet now, which was somehow worse than his shouting. The galaxy burns, civilizations die, and humanity sends 1 ship? Hana stepped forward, her movements jerky with agitation. Is this a joke to your people? Do you find our extinction amusing? 1 ship cannot even delay the swarm for an hour. Day-One remained still. He had practiced this moment in his mind 1,000 times. Everything depended on what he said next and how he said it. The weight of his species' reputation rested on his shoulders. More than that, the survival of the galaxy might depend on whether these desperate beings could trust him just a little bit longer. "You don't understand what we've built," Day One said quietly. "You will." "Explain," Threx demanded, leaning forward on the podium. "Explain now, or I will have you removed from this chamber and humanity expelled from the Coalition. We have no time for mysteries." Day One met the Admiral's eyes without blinking. "My government has forbidden me from revealing details until the ship arrives. I can tell you only this. Humanity has spent 2 years preparing for this war. Every resource, every brilliant mind, every factory, all focused on a single project. The ship that is coming represents everything we are capable of becoming. One ship," Hana repeated, her mechanical eye whirring as it focused on Day One. "You expect us to believe one ship will make a difference against billions of Viral drones?" "I expect you to witness it," Day One replied. "The ship will arrive at the Keros 9 system in 4 days. Admiral Threx, I request that you assemble your remaining forces there. All of them. Every vessel you can spare." The chamber exploded with noise again. Delegates demanded answers, explanations, proof. Some called for Day One's arrest. Others simply wept, convinced that humanity's betrayal meant the end of all hope. Through it all, Day One stood silent and still, his face betraying nothing. Threx raised one massive arm and the chamber gradually quieted. The Admiral stared at Day One for a long moment and something passed between them. Recognition, perhaps, or simply the acknowledgement of two beings who had both seen too much death. "Keros 9 in 4 days, Threx said finally. "I will bring what remains of the fleet. But understand this, Ambassador. If your ship fails, if this is some desperate bluff or a sign that humanity cannot deliver on its promises, there will be consequences. Your homeworld will be marked as having abandoned the galaxy in its darkest hour." Day One nodded slowly. "I understand, Admiral. 4 days. I promise you, nothing in this galaxy will be the same after you see what we've built." As the chamber dissolved into smaller arguments and desperate planning sessions, Day One returned to his position against the wall. He allowed himself one moment of weakness, closing his eyes and thinking of Earth, thinking of the volunteers, thinking of what they had sacrificed so this moment could happen. His hands trembled slightly, but he clasped them behind his back where no one could see. 4 days. In 4 days, the galaxy would learn what humanity had become. In 4 days, everything would change. He only hoped the cost would be worth it. The Keros 9 system was dying. 3 of its 5 planets had already been stripped bare by previous Viral attacks, leaving nothing but exposed cores glowing dull red in the darkness. The remaining Coalition fleet had gathered here as ordered, a pathetic collection of damaged vessels that represented the last hope of 47 civilizations. From the bridge of his flagship, Admiral Threx watched the scanner displays with growing despair. 237 ships. That was all that remained of the mighty Coalition armada that had once numbered in the thousands. Most were operating at partial capacity, their crews exhausted, their weapons nearly depleted. They had positioned themselves in a defensive formation around Keros 9's 4th planet, the last population center in the system. "Reconnaissance reports Viral activity in the outer system," reported his tactical officer. "Estimated arrival 18 hours. Threx's tail lashed in frustration. 18 hours until the next battle. Perhaps the last battle. And the humans had promised them a miracle. 1 ship. He had been a fool to believe Day One's words. "Sir," the communications officer suddenly stiffened, faster than light transit detected. "Single vessel. Signature matches human technology. Put it on the main display," Threx ordered, his heart suddenly beating faster. Around the bridge, his crew fell silent. This was the moment. The legendary human vessel that would somehow save them all. He tried to suppress the bitter laugh rising in his throat. The display flickered, and then the ship appeared. Threx felt his breath catch. Around the bridge, he heard gasps and chittering sounds of shock from his mixed-species crew. On ships throughout the fleet, similar reactions were occurring. The vessel was enormous. 20 kilometers long, shaped like an elongated cylinder with strange protrusions along its length. It dwarfed every Coalition vessel in the system. Its hull was dark gray, almost black, and seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. No windows were visible, no obvious weapons ports, just smooth dark metal that radiated an aura of wrongness. "Hail them," Threx ordered, keeping his voice steady through force of will. Immediately, the response came within seconds. A human female appeared on the screen. She wore a dark uniform without decoration except for a small name tag that read, Captain Ji-won. Her face was young, perhaps 30 standard years, with short black hair and eyes that seemed unnaturally calm. She smiled slightly, but it didn't reach her eyes. Admiral Thorex, she said, her translated voice clear and professional. I am Captain Ji-won of the Korean space naval ship Taejin, requesting permission to approach the fleet. Granted, Thorex said slowly. His mind was racing. That ship was massive, yes. Impressive, certainly. But one vessel, no matter how large, could not stand against the swarm. Captain, I must speak with you directly. The situation is more desperate than you may realize. I understand completely, Admiral. I would be honored to host you aboard the Taejin. I believe a tour of our capabilities would be beneficial for Coalition command staff. Again, that slight smile that conveyed no warmth. Please bring your senior officers. You'll want to see this. 2 hours later, Thorex found himself in a shuttle approaching the massive human vessel. Beside him sat Hana and 4 other senior commanders from different species. All of them stared out the viewports at the Taejin as it grew larger and larger. The scale was difficult to process. The ship's hull seemed to go on forever. Look at the temperature readings, Hana said quietly, her mechanical eye focusing on her data pad. The hull surface is near freezing, much colder than any ship should be, and there's some kind of vibration, low frequency, like the entire vessel is humming. The shuttle bay was cavernous and nearly empty. As they disembarked, Thorex noticed the air was cold. His breath misted slightly. The lighting was dim and their footsteps echoed in the vast space. A young human male waited for them, wearing the same dark uniform as the captain. He bowed slightly in the human gesture of respect. I am Chief Engineer Minho. Welcome aboard the Taejin. Captain Ji-won is waiting in the command center. Please follow me. His voice was enthusiastic, almost excited. It was jarring compared to the captain's eerie calmness. They walked through corridors that seemed to stretch endlessly. Thorex noticed something disturbing. Where are your crew quarters? Where do your people sleep? Minho glanced back at him. The Taejin requires minimal crew, Admiral. 12 people operate this entire vessel. Everything else is automated. 12 people? Hana's mandibles clicked in disbelief. This ship is 20 kilometers long and you crew it with 12 people. We don't need more, Minho said simply. He stopped at a massive door that opened with a hiss. The command center. The room beyond was dimly lit and dominated by holographic displays showing every angle of the Taejin and the surrounding space. Captain Ji-won stood in the center, her hands clasped behind her back. Beside her stood another human, a female officer with cold eyes who introduced herself as Tactical Officer Yuna. Thank you for coming, Ji-won said. She gestured to the displays. Let me show you what humanity has built. For the next hour, Minho walked them through the ship's systems. The more Thorex heard, the less he understood. The descriptions didn't match any ship classification he knew. No troop carriers. No fighter base. The weapon system seemed minimal, designed for defense rather than attack. Instead, the vessel was dominated by what Minho called fabrication units and resource processing centers. I don't understand, Thorex finally interrupted. You've brought us a factory ship? What good is manufacturing capacity in the middle of a battle? Ji-won turned to face him fully. Her expression remained serene, but something flickered in her eyes. Pride, perhaps, or sorrow. The Taejin isn't a warship in the traditional sense, Admiral. It's something else. Something new. We call it a production vessel. Production of what? Hana demanded. Her frustration was evident in the clicking of her mandibles. Minho pulled up a schematic on the display. It showed a small craft roughly 5 meters long, bristling with weapons and sensors. These, we call them autonomous combat units. Drones, essentially, but not simple machines. Each one carries advanced processing capability. Each one can make tactical decisions independently while remaining networked with all the others. Thorex stared at the schematic. You've brought us drones? Admiral, every species uses combat drones. They're useful for harassment and reconnaissance, but they cannot stand against the swarm's numbers. You're correct, Ji-won said quietly. Normal drones cannot stand against the swarm. But our drones are different. Minho, tell them the production numbers. The young engineer grinned, and there was something unsettling about his enthusiasm. The Tajin can produce 5,000 units per hour. We've been mining asteroids for 2 years, stockpiling raw materials. Current inventory suggests we can manufacture and deploy approximately 50,000 units before resource depletion. The command center fell completely silent. Threx felt his blood chill. 50,000? You can produce 50,000 combat drones. If necessary, yes, G1 confirmed. But we estimate 30 to 40,000 should be sufficient for this engagement. Hana stepped forward, her compound eyes fixed on the schematic. I've studied warfare for 3 decades. I've commanded fleets against impossible odds, but I've never heard of anything like this. How can you manufacture so quickly? How can you deploy such numbers? Humanity learned from our own history, G1 said. Her voice remained calm, but something dark entered her expression. We had wars that consumed millions of lives. We built weapons that could destroy our entire world. And we learned that the species who wins is not the one with the bravest warriors. It's the one who can build more, faster, and deploy more efficiently. She paused. The Vrall swarm thinks it wins through numbers. Let's see what they think when they face a species that turned industry into a weapon. Before anyone could respond, alarms began wailing throughout the ship. Yuna turned sharply to her console. Reconnaissance update. The Vrall swarm has accelerated. New ETA, 40 minutes. Vessel count, 3,800. Threx felt his legs weaken. They had hours left, not days. 3,800 Vrall bioships against 237 battered coalition vessels, and 1 massive human factory. It was over. They had lost before the battle even began. Jiwan walked calmly to the tactical display and studied it for a moment. Then she turned to her crew. Begin production cycle. All fabrication units to maximum output. Minho, I want the first wave ready in 15 minutes. Yes, Captain. Minho moved to his station, fingers flying over controls. Throughout the ship, that low humming sound increased in frequency and volume. Jiwan looked at Threx, and for the first time he saw something behind that serene mask. Determination and something else. Sadness. Admiral, I suggest you return your officers to your ships. When the swarm arrives, hold defensive positions. Don't engage until I give the order. And what will you do? Threx asked quietly. Jiwan turned back to the display, watching as her ship's systems came alive. We're going to release the swarm. Our swarm. The Tajin transformed before their eyes. Through the viewports of his flagship, Admiral Threx watched as sections of the massive vessel's hull opened like a flower blooming in reverse. Thousands of launch bays revealed themselves, each one glowing with red light from internal manufacturing processes. The low humming they had heard inside the ship now vibrated through space itself, detectable on every sensor array in the system. Captain Jiwan has requested direct communication channels remain open, his communications officer reported. She wants us to observe everything. Threx activated the channel. On his screen, Jiwan stood in the Tajin's command center, still impossibly calm. Behind her, holographic displays showed the interior of her ship. What he saw made his blood run cold. The entire interior had become a vast assembly line. Robotic arms moved in perfect synchronization, each one building components at speeds too fast for organic eyes to follow. Raw materials flowed through tubes like blood through veins. In each fabrication bay, a combat drone took shape every 12 seconds. Weapons mounted, armor plated, power cores activated, and then the units moved to launch tubes ready to deploy. Minho wasn't exaggerating, Hana said from her station on her own ship, patched into the same channel. They really can produce 5,000 per hour. This is beyond industrial capacity. This is something else entirely. Minho's voice came through the channel, still carrying that unsettling enthusiasm. We've been optimizing this process for 2 years. Every movement calculated for maximum efficiency. Every component designed for rapid assembly. The Tajin isn't just a ship. It's the most advanced manufacturing platform ever created. Threx wanted to feel hope, wanted to believe that humanity's technological miracle could save them. But he had seen the Vrall swarm before. He had watched their bioships tear through coalition battle lines like they were made of paper. Could drones, no matter how numerous, really make a difference? First wave launching, Yuna announced. 4,000 units deploying now. The launch bays erupted with activity. Combat drones shot out into space by the hundreds, then thousands. They were smaller than Threx had imagined, only 5 meters long, but they moved with frightening precision. Each one immediately took position in a formation that seemed chaotic at first. but gradually revealed itself as a complex three-dimensional pattern. "They're networking," Hana said, wonder creeping into her voice. "Look at their communication frequencies. Every drone is connected to every other drone. It's like watching a school of fish move as one organism." "That's exactly what it is," Jiwan said quietly. "Each unit has individual tactical capability, but they operate as a collective intelligence. They learn from each other, adapt to each other, evolve their strategies in real time." Threx felt something twist in his chest. "You built your own swarm. You saw what the Vral do and you replicated it." "We improved it," Jiwan corrected. "The Vral are biological. Slow to adapt, slow to manufacture replacements. Our drones are digital. Every death transmits combat data to the survivors. Every loss makes the swarm smarter, and we can replace casualties faster than they can destroy them." The words should have been reassuring. Instead, they filled Threx with a creeping horror he couldn't quite name. There was something deeply wrong about this, something that violated principles he didn't have words for. But before he could voice his concerns, the sensors screamed warnings. "Vral swarm entering engagement range," his tactical officer reported. 3,800 bioships. They're forming attack pattern Delta 7. Through the viewports and on every display, the enemy appeared. The Vral bioships were organic nightmares, each one a massive creature of flesh and chitin that had been grown rather than built. They pulsed with bioluminescence, green and purple lights rippling across their surfaces. Weapon ports opened like mouths filled with teeth. They moved with predatory grace, already accelerating toward the coalition defensive line. Threx opened fleet-wide communications. "All ships, hold position. Wait for the captain's signal." His voice was steady despite the fear coursing through him. "This is not our battle." Not yet. The Vral swarm crossed into firing range. Their weapons charged, preparing to unleash the devastating organic projectiles that had destroyed so many coalition vessels. They expected the standard defensive formation, the desperate last stand of a dying fleet. Instead, they met the human swarm. "Release authorization granted," Jiwan said. Her voice remained calm, but Threx noticed her hands were clenched into fists at her sides. "All units engage. Protocol 7. No survivors." 8,000 human drones surged forward in a wave that defied military logic. They didn't form defensive screens or maintain safe distances. They swarmed like insects, like the very enemy they had been designed to fight. But there was a terrible precision to their chaos, a mathematical perfection to their movements. The first Vral bioship fired its weapons at the approaching mass. Organic projectiles splattered across dozens of drones, dissolving their armor with acidic compounds. The drones died, exploding in small bursts of light. 50 units destroyed in seconds. The remaining drones didn't scatter or retreat. They adapted. Formation shifted. Instead of approaching in a dense mass, they spread out, making themselves harder targets. 300 drones focused fire on the bioship that had attacked, their weapons coordinating perfectly. The Vral vessel's organic armor cracked, then shattered. It died, its bioluminescence fading to black. "Production continuing," Minho reported. "Second wave ready. 6,000 units standing by." "Launch them," Jiwan ordered. "Maintain overwhelming numerical superiority at all times." 6,000 more drones erupted from the Tajin's bays. The battle was barely 2 minutes old, and humanity had already deployed 14,000 combat units. The Vral swarm, encountering resistance beyond anything they had faced before, shifted tactics. They began focusing fire on clusters of drones, accepting losses to destroy larger numbers of enemies. It didn't matter. For every 100 drones destroyed, 200 more launched. The mathematics of attrition had reversed. The Vral swarm was losing ships faster than they could destroy drones, and the drones were getting smarter. Threx watched in fascinated horror as the battle unfolded. The human drones learned with frightening speed. After 5 minutes, they had developed new tactics. Some units became kamikazes, ramming bioships at key structural points. Others formed protective screens around damaged units, buying time for coordinated strikes. Still others hung back, analyzing enemy patterns and transmitting data to the rest of the swarm. "They're fighting like the Vral," Hana said, her voice hollow. "But they're fighting better. More efficiently. This is what perfect warfare looks like." A Vral bioship broke through the drone screen and accelerated toward the coalition fleet, weapons charging. Before Threx could order defensive fire, 300 drones materialized around it. They attacked from every angle simultaneously, overwhelming its organic defenses in seconds. The bioship never got within firing range. Third wave launching, Una announced. Total deployed, 22,000 units. The space around Karis 9 had become a graveyard. Debris from destroyed drones and bioships created clouds of wreckage. The Vral swarm tried to adapt, tried to find weaknesses in the drone formations, but they were fighting an enemy that learned faster than they could evolve, an enemy that could replace losses faster than they could inflict them. Ji-Wan stood motionless in her command center, watching the displays. Her face showed no emotion, but Threx noticed her hands trembling slightly. Status report, she said quietly. Enemy losses, 1,200 bioships, Una reported. Our losses, 8,400 units. Production rate maintaining. Currently deployed 18,000 units. Victory projections 97%. 97%. The coalition was winning. No, not winning. They were dominating. The virile swarm that had crushed civilizations was being systematically destroyed by humanity's industrial nightmare. But Threx felt no joy. Only a growing sense of wrongness. He activated a private channel to Ji-Wan. Captain, this is remarkable. But I must ask, how did your species develop this technology so quickly? This level of automation, this production capacity? It seems impossible. Ji-Wan turned to look at him through the screen. For the first time, her mask cracked. He saw exhaustion in her eyes. And something else. Guilt. Deep, terrible guilt. It's not impossible, Admiral, she said softly. It just requires sacrifice. The kind of sacrifice that changes what you are. She paused, watching her drones tear apart another bioship. You asked what makes our drones different. What gives them such advanced tactical capability, such ability to adapt and learn? Yes, Threx said. Your artificial intelligence is beyond anything we've seen. It's not artificial intelligence, Ji-Wan said. The words came out like a confession. That's what I've been trying to tell you. The drones aren't piloted by AI. Before Threx could ask what she meant, a new voice came through the channel. It was distorted, layered with electronic noise, but recognizable as human, male, young. Admiral Threx, this is Siok. I'm currently distributed across 214 combat units in Sector 7. I was a fighter pilot before. Now I'm this. The battle raged for 6 hours. In that time, the space around Karos 9 became a nightmare landscape of debris and death. Destroyed Vral bioships drifted in pieces, their bioluminescence fading like dying stars. Among them floated the shattered remains of thousands of human drones, each one a fragment of someone's uploaded consciousness. Admiral Threx had ordered the coalition fleet to hold defensive positions, not because tactics demanded it, but because he couldn't bring himself to send his crews into that hell. They watched in silence as humanity's digital army fought and died in numbers that made his head spin. Every few minutes, another wave of drones launched from the Taijin, replacing losses faster than the Vral could inflict them. Enemy forces down to 800 bioships, his tactical officer reported. The officer's voice was shaking. They're attempting to retreat, but the drones are pursuing. On Thorex's screen, Captain Ji-Wan stood like a statue in her command center. She hadn't moved in hours except to issue occasional orders. Her face was pale and dark circles had appeared under her eyes. Behind her, Engineer Minho and Tactical Officer Yuna worked their stations with mechanical efficiency. But Threx could see the strain on their faces, too. Don't let them escape, Ji-Wan said quietly. Complete elimination. No survivors to report back to their main fleet. The drones obeyed. They were relentless, efficient, terrifying in their coordination. A group of Vral bioships tried to form a defensive cluster, but 5,000 drones descended on them like predators. Within minutes, only wreckage remained. A transport shuttle approached Threx's flagship. When it docked, Ambassador Daewon emerged. The human looked like he had aged years in the past few days. His neat suit was rumpled and his eyes were red. He walked onto the bridge without requesting permission and stood next to Threx, staring at the battle displays. You knew, Threx said. It wasn't a question. You knew what they were sending, what those drones really are. Yes, Daewon said simply. His voice was hollow. I was there when they asked for volunteers. I watched 500,000 people line up to have their consciousness copied. We only needed 50,000. Had to turn people away. He laughed bitterly. Turn away volunteers for their own extinction. What kind of world is that? This is an abomination, Hana's voice crackled over the channel. She had been silent for hours, but now anger filled her translated words. Those are people. Living beings. You've turned them into weapons. Into disposable ammunition. They volunteered, Day One said, but there was no conviction in his words. Every single one. They knew what they were signing up for. That doesn't make it right, Threx said. His forearms gripped the railing in front of him hard enough to make the metal creak. We asked for your help. We didn't ask for this. We didn't ask you to sacrifice your humanity. What did you expect? Day One turned to face him, and Threx saw raw pain in the ambassador's eyes. You came to Earth begging for help, showed us images of destroyed worlds, told us billions were dying, said the galaxy needed saving. What were we supposed to do, say no? Let everyone die because our solution made you uncomfortable? Before Threx could respond, a new voice came through the communication system. Female, also layered with electronic distortion. My name is Bora. I was a teacher. I had 3 children. When I heard about the war, I knew I had to do something. But I'm not a soldier. I can't fight. The voice paused. So I became one. I've been destroyed 14 times since this battle started. Each time my consciousness gets recopied from backup and uploaded to new units. Each time I remember dying. But my children are safe. Earth is safe. The galaxy will be safe. That's all that matters. Silence fell across the bridge. Threx wanted to argue, wanted to scream that this was wrong, that no victory was worth this cost. But he had no right. His people were dying. The Krell were facing extinction. 63 civilizations had already been wiped from existence. And here stood humanity, willing to sacrifice their very souls to save species they had only known for 2 years. Captain G1, Threx said heavily, report current losses. G1 didn't turn from her displays. 47,000 units deployed. Estimated 31,000 destroyed beyond recovery. Their backup files were corrupted or lost in combat. They're gone. Her voice cracked slightly on the last word. Gone. 31,000 human beings, dead. Not just killed, but erased. No bodies to recover. No final words to family. Just gone, deleted like corrupted data files. Threx felt sick. Victory was assured now. The Viral swarm was down to less than 200 bioships, being hunted down systematically. But the cost. The terrible, unspeakable cost. All coalition vessels, Threx said into the fleet-wide channel. Stand down. This battle is over. The humans have won. He paused, struggling for words. Prepare to receive casualties for memorial registration. Negative, G1 said. There are no bodies, Admiral. Nothing to memorialize. Just deleted files. The last Viral bioship died in a burst of coordinated weapons fire. The drones, their task complete, began forming up into organized formations and returning to the Tajin. Threx watched them dock in launch bays, these digital ghosts wearing mechanical bodies. 17,000 units returned. 17,000 fragments of human consciousness that had survived the battle. Ambassador Day One activated his communication device and made a call to Earth. When the connection established, a woman appeared on the screen. She was crying.
How many?
She asked. 31,000, Day One said. 58,000 deployed. 31,000 permanent losses. The woman on the screen buried her face in her hands. Behind her, others were visible. Families, friends, people who had said goodbye to loved ones who volunteered to become weapons. They had known the risks, but knowing and experiencing were different things. I need to speak with Captain G1, Threx said quietly, privately. A moment later, G1's image appeared on a secure channel. Up close, Threx could see the full extent of her exhaustion. Her hands were trembling. Her eyes looked haunted. This woman had commanded 31,000 people to their deaths. No, worse. She had commanded them to deletion, to complete erasure from existence. Why? Threx asked. Why did your people do this? G1 was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was barely a whisper. Because someone had to. Because we looked at the mathematics and realized conventional warfare couldn't win. The Viral reproduce too fast, adapt too quickly, outnumber everyone too completely. The only way to defeat a swarm is with another swarm, a better swarm. There had to be another way, Threx said, but even he could hear the lack of conviction in his words. There wasn't. G1 looked directly at him. We ran every simulation, analyzed every strategy. The only viable solution was overwhelming numerical superiority combined with adaptive intelligence. That meant drones. Billions of drones. But we couldn't manufacture AI advanced enough to match the VRAL's collective intelligence. We tried for a year, failed every time. She paused. So we asked for volunteers. People who would give up their biological bodies and become digital warriors. People who understood they might never be human again. And they agreed, Threx said. 500,000 of them, Jiwan confirmed. We could have filled the Tajin 10 times over with volunteers. Humans aren't brave, Admiral. We're terrified. But we're also stubborn. When we see something that needs doing, we do it, no matter what it costs us. Through the viewport, Threx watched the Tajin. The massive vessel's launch bays were closing. The drones had all returned to internal storage. The ship looked peaceful now, almost serene. It was impossible to believe it was a tomb for 31,000 souls. What happens to the survivors? Threx asked. The 17,000 who made it back? They go home, Jiwan said. Some will choose to remain digital. Others will attempt reintegration into cloned bodies. It doesn't always work. The mind can reject flesh after existing as code. She closed her eyes. Many won't survive the transition. We estimate 70% failure rate for consciousness re-upload into biological form. More deaths. Even the survivors might not truly survive. Threx felt rage building in his chest. Not at humanity. At the universe. At the Viral. At the cruel mathematics that had made this necessary. 47 civilizations, and none of them had been willing or able to make this sacrifice. Only the humans, the youngest species in the coalition, had looked at extinction and decided their humanity was a fair price for survival. I'm sorry, Threx said finally. I'm sorry we asked this of you. Jiwan opened her eyes. They were wet with unshed tears. Don't be sorry, Admiral. Just make sure we didn't do this for nothing. Make sure the galaxy remembers. Not what we achieved. What we lost. She took a shaking breath. 31,000 people. Say their names. Build them monuments. Tell their stories. That's all I ask. The transmission ended. Threx stood on his bridge, surrounded by his crew, and felt more alone than he had ever felt in his life. Victory. They had won. The coalition was saved. And all it cost was 31,000 human souls deleted from existence. Sir? His communications officer said hesitantly. Ambassador Day-Wan is requesting permission to broadcast a message to the fleet. Granted, Threx said. 3 weeks after the Battle of Karos 9, the Coalition Council met again on Sanctuary Prime. The station's sirens were finally silent. The Viral swarm had retreated from Coalition space after losing their expeditionary force. Intelligence suggested they wouldn't return for months, perhaps years. The galaxy had been given time to breathe, to rebuild, to survive. But the chamber was filled with tension thick enough to cut. Admiral Threx stood at the podium, his forearms crossed over his chest. The human vessel Tajin eliminated 3,800 Viral bioships with 0 coalition casualties. The victory was absolute. Mathematically, we should be celebrating. He paused. Instead, we're here to discuss whether humanity has committed a war crime. The chamber erupted in shouting. Half the delegates were on their feet, either supporting or condemning humanity's methods. Ambassador Day-Wan sat in his usual position against the wall, looking smaller and more tired than ever. He didn't try to defend his species. He just listened. They turned people into weapons, a Valtorian delegate shouted. Consciousness upload should be banned. This technology is an abomination. They saved us, Hana countered, her mechanical eye whirring. My species still exists because 31,000 humans were willing to die. How dare we judge their sacrifice when it's not about judgment, another delegate argued. It's about precedent. If we allow this, if we say consciousness weaponization is acceptable, what comes next? Do we all start uploading our populations into war machines? Is that the future we want? Threx raised an arm for silence. Gradually, the chamber quieted. I've reviewed the legal frameworks. Technically, humanity broke no laws. The volunteers were legal adults. They signed consent forms. They understood the risks. He looked directly at Day-Wan. But laws and ethics are different things. Ambassador, will you speak? Day-Wan stood slowly and walked to the center of the chamber. He looked around at the assembled representatives, species from across the galaxy who owed their continued existence to his people's sacrifice. I could defend what we did. I could argue necessity. Point out that you asked for our help. Show you the simulations proving no other strategy would work. He shook his head. But I won't, because you're right to be horrified. Silence fell across the chamber. This wasn't what anyone had expected to hear. What we did was terrible, Daewon continued. We took human beings and turned them into code, fragmented their consciousness across mechanical bodies, sent them to die knowing they could never truly come back. Some of them were killed and resurrected multiple times during that battle. Can you imagine that? Dying, being rebooted from backup and dying again? Experiencing death over and over? His voice cracked. One of those people was my nephew. He was 23 years old. He died 7 times before his backup became corrupted. Now he's just gone, deleted, no body to bury, no grave to visit. Just an error message in a computer system. Hana stood from her seat. Ambassador, I'm sorry for your loss. But your nephew saved my children. My entire species. Doesn't that mean something? It means everything, Daewon said. And nothing. Yes, the galaxy is saved. Yes, billions of lives will continue because of what we did. But we paid for that victory with our humanity, not metaphorically. Literally. 31,000 people who will never breathe again, never touch another person, never experience anything organic ever again. They became pure data and then they became nothing. He looked around the chamber. So you want to know what humanity's position is? We're done. The Taegean will be dismantled. The technology will be destroyed. We will never do this again. What if the Vral return in greater numbers? A delegate asked. What if we need you again? Then the galaxy will fall, Daewon said flatly. Because we won't pay this price twice. We can't. Our people are traumatized. The families of the volunteers. The survivors who made it back and can't readjust to biological life. Did you know that 43 of the survivors have already committed suicide? They couldn't handle being flesh again after existing as pure thought. They described it as suffocation, being trapped in meat. He laughed bitterly. We saved the galaxy and destroyed ourselves in the process. Captain Jiwon entered the chamber. She hadn't been scheduled to attend, but no one stopped her as she walked to stand beside Daewon. She looked even worse than she had during the battle. Her uniform hung loosely on her frame. Her eyes were sunken and dead. I commanded those people to their deaths, Jiwon said. Her voice was barely audible. I gave the orders. I watched the casualty numbers climb. I authorized wave after wave, knowing each one meant more permanent deletions. And I did it because it was necessary. She looked at the assembled delegates. I want you to know something. Every species in this chamber would have done the same thing if you could have. But you couldn't. You didn't have the technology. You didn't have people willing to volunteer. You didn't have the industrial capacity. So you asked us. You begged us for help. And when we delivered, you have the audacity to debate whether we were ethical. She laughed, and it was a broken sound. We were the only species willing to pay the real cost of victory. And you want to judge us for it? Threk stepped down from the podium and approached the 2 humans. Captain Jiwon, Ambassador Daewon. On behalf of the coalition, I want to say something. Not as an admiral. As a person who watched your people sacrifice everything. He performed the Valtorian gesture of ultimate respect. All 4 arms extended. We had no right to ask this of you, and we have no right to judge you for answering. What you did was horrible and necessary and brave and wrong and right all at once. History will debate it forever. But I know this, I'm alive because of your species. My children are alive. My entire civilization exists because 31,000 humans ceased to exist. His voice broke. Thank you. And I'm sorry. Both. Forever. One by one, other delegates stood and performed their own species' gestures of respect. Even those who had argued against humanity's methods. Even those who feared the precedent. Because in the end, they were all alive because of the sacrifice, and that mattered more than philosophy. Daewon watched them, his face unreadable. Then he spoke one final time. The coalition wanted to hold a memorial service. We declined. Because there's nothing to memorialize. No bodies, no graves, just names in a database. He pulled out a data chip. This contains the names of all 31,000 volunteers. Their biographical information. Their reasons for volunteering. Their final messages to loved ones. We're giving this to the coalition archives. Not for praise. For memory, so that when future generations debate whether we were heroes or monsters, they can at least know who we were. 3 months later, Earth constructed a monument. It stood in the center of Geneva, where the old United Nations building had once been. The monument was a simple black wall, 50 meters long and 10 meters high. Carved into its surface were 31,000 names. No ranks, no designations. Just names and a single line of text beneath them all. They gave everything. May we never ask such sacrifice again. Captain Jiwon visited the monument every day. She would stand in front of it for hours, reading names. Sometimes she would speak to them, apologizing or explaining or simply remembering. Other visitors would see her and respectfully keep their distance. Everyone on Earth knew who she was, the captain who had commanded the dead. On this particular day, someone approached her, an older woman with gray hair and kind eyes. She stood beside Jiwon and looked at the wall. My daughter's name is there. Fourth panel, 306th name down. Her name was Bora. Jiwon felt her breath catch. The teacher. 3 children. I remember her voice on the communications channel. She loved her students, the woman said softly. Loved teaching them about the world, about space, about other species and other planets. When the war came, she couldn't fight. Couldn't pilot ships or fire weapons, but she could become something that could. The woman touched the wall, fingers tracing her daughter's name. She sent me a message before the upload. Said she was scared but determined. Said her children needed a future and she was going to give them one. I'm sorry, Jiwon whispered. I'm so sorry. Don't be. The woman turned to look at her. My daughter made her choice. They all did. You gave them the chance to matter, to save something bigger than themselves. That's all anyone can ask for, she paused. But you need to forgive yourself, Captain. My daughter wouldn't want you to spend your life at this wall. I commanded them to die, Jiwon said. How do I forgive that? By living, the woman said simply. By remembering. By making sure their sacrifice meant something. That's the burden of command, not guilt, responsibility. Across the galaxy, other monuments were being built. The Krell constructed an entire city dedicated to humanity's sacrifice. The Valtorians renamed their largest moon Humanity's Gift. 47 species, each finding their own way to honor the 31,000 who had ceased to exist, so others could live. But on Earth, the debate raged. Was it heroic or horrific? Had humanity saved the galaxy or violated something fundamental about consciousness and identity? Universities held symposiums. Philosophers argued. Ethicists debated. Religious leaders offered conflicting interpretations. The technology for consciousness upload was locked away, classified beyond the highest security levels.